I get the call from my director. Congrats, Kate. You've made the Paris Paralympic roster. And in the moment, I couldn't even be excited because I do not have a bike. I literally do not have a bike right now that is race legal. So the first thing out of my mouth was, okay, what do we do about my bike?
Welcome to Athlete Actually, the women's sports podcast where we ask the questions athletes actually want to answer. I'm Elizabeth Montalvan, a professional water skier and marketing strategist, and this show is produced by Parity, a women's sports marketing and sponsorship consultancy. Welcome to today's episode of Athlete Actually. I'm your host, Elizabeth Montalvan, and today I'm joined by Kate Brim, a Paralympic gold medalist and world champion hand cyclist for Team USA. As a 4-time world champion and 2-time medalist at the Paris Paralympic Games, Kate has quickly established herself as one of the top athletes in adaptive cycling. But her path to the podium has been anything but typical. After a routine surgery in 2017 left her a quadriplegic, Kate had to relearn what independence looked like, eventually discovering adaptive sport and a passion for hand cycling. She's since gone on to compete and win at the highest level, even while managing a type 1 diabetes diagnosis, becoming a powerful example of an athlete who always finds her way back to sport. This season of Athlete Actually is presented by DNA Vibe. DNA Vibe is a new category of wearable regenerative technology designed to support the body's natural recovery processes, trusted by athletes, trainers, and high performers who are redefining what strength, recovery, and longevity look like. DNA Vibe's patented wearable devices combine non-thermal red and near-infrared light, micromagnetic signaling, and microvibration to work in harmony with the body's natural processes to support circulation, comfort, and overall well-being, helping you move better, recover smarter, and stay in the game. If you're training hard or simply want to feel and perform your best, you can learn more at dnavibe.com/recovery. Before we get into today's conversation, I want to start with On Our Radar, one thing from the world of women's sports that's caught our attention. Here's the headline. The WNBA has officially entered a new salary era, and it's changing what's possible for women athletes in real time. The context? Well, this is following the league's new collective bargaining agreement, and we're now seeing contracts at a level that didn't even exist a year ago. Asia Wilson signed a 3-year, $5 million deal, and then just days later, Aaliyah Boston surpassed that total value with a 4-year, $6.3 million extension. All thanks to a new provision that allows top-performing players to reach max contracts earlier. My takeaway? For perspective, the highest paid players in the league were just making around $250,000 last season. So this isn't incremental growth. It is a complete reset. And more importantly, it signals that women's sports aren't going away anytime soon. And they're finally starting to pay like it. So that's what's on our radar, and this is Kate Brim. Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to hear your story, and I really want to dive straight into it. But before I do that, I have some manners, so let me ask you, how are you doing? What have you been up to lately?
Thank you for having me. I'm absolutely honored to be here. And I'm getting back into the swing of racing this year, which has been an absolute honor. And I'm so excited to be back into racing. It's been nerve-wracking, exciting. My first World Cup this past month went really well. Managed to do a full sweep and win in the team relay, the time trial, and the road race, which was really cool. And also, we just had a really challenging course. And it was in a new location for the first time ever. It was held in Asia, which they have never had a World Cup or World Championships held over there. So this was a pretty big deal. And so for that being my first race back was absolutely amazing. And, it's been quite the journey over these past couple years.
I feel like we're about to add so much context to this incredible comeback you just described, because that is the whole point of my next question, which is, Kate, tell me your sports story that no one's ever asked you about.
Yeah. So I was injured in December of 2017. I sustained a spinal cord injury because of surgery, which is, as you know, pretty rare. And it's that little 2% chance that we all sign away with for surgeries and stuff that none of us ever blink an eye at or think about. So it was definitely an eye-opener. I was 19 years old at the time. I was going to school for construction management. Thought I had my life set. I was very naive in that way of like, cool, I have life's hardest job done. I'm going to school for construction management. I'm working in directional drilling, doing construction work already at the ripe age of 19. I had started when I was about 14 or 15 working. And so I had really enjoyed it. I loved it. I was like, yep, this is the path of my life and this is going to be it. And then my injury happened and that was completely taken from me. And it was very hard at first. And, when I was first injured, they gave me some pretty harsh realities as far as, what my life would look like. And so that was hard to hear. They told me I'd need a caregiver 24/7. I'd never be able to be independent. And, they thought that living in a nursing home would honestly be the best option for me, just based upon my level of injury and the extent of my injury. And that was very hard to hear and put me in a pretty dark place for several weeks when I was first injured. It's hard to hear when you're 19 years old because many of us, when we think of nursing homes, we think of, the places that our grandparents go, when they just become a little more less independent and need extra help and stuff. And so that was my thought. I was like, no way in hell am I going to be put in a place with a bunch of old people. It came later on to learn, that is not the case for nursing homes. Yes, it is a large population, but it is also a tool for people with extensive disabilities and diagnoses. It is a huge tool, and it's a tool that I understand is very valuable now, and I'm grateful that it's there. But it was not for me. Thankfully, I was sent to an amazing rehabilitation hospital, Mary Free Bed. And their whole goal is getting people back to doing what they love, whether it be through community, through religion, through sport, you name it. That's their goal. No matter the diagnosis, the disability, they're going to figure out a way for it to make it happen. And that's exactly what they did for me. For me, like I said, I felt like I was starting all over again with life. And they introduced me to adaptive sport. And so my first couple years after my injury, I was trying everything under the sun you could imagine, and enjoying every bit of it. And I fell in love with hand cycling and wheelchair rugby. And I love both of them very much, but hand cycling especially, just the freedom that it gave me, the independence that it gave me, and it got me out of my wheelchair and just feeling a little more, in the beginning days, just like normal, level with my peers around me, and like I wasn't someone different, or sometimes I felt like a burden in many ways. And so that was hard. But, hand cycling and wheelchair rugby community within both is what really started to show me my independence and what's truly possible, and, how far we can push ourselves and stuff. And, the sky's the limit as far as opportunities, if you are willing to get out of your comfort zone and try them. And that's exactly what I did with Mary Free Bed. And, they were a huge stepping stone, in my career. And, I couldn't thank them enough. But yeah, so I did, wheelchair rugby and hand cycling pretty recreationally at first, for the first few years. 'Cause I just, for some reason, I was like, the competition side of things isn't for me, I don't think. And, I just enjoy the recreational side and the social aspects of it, and it getting me out there. And then after enough people egging me on to get into competition, I did my first paracycling race and immediately fell in love with it and had the thought of like, my goodness, why did I say no for so long? Yeah, so it was one of those moments, and I was a rower, able-bodied, and so, I've always had a competitive spirit, and I always did when I was doing group rides and when I was coming to practices for wheelchair rugby. I was always very competitive out there, which is why people were always being like, come on, you got to try this, you got to try this. And so, yeah, when I finally said yes, I felt like a whole new set of doors opened for me, just the amount of people that I met and amount of new things that I learned, and just the amount that it helped me grow and stuff in my learning independence and becoming confident in myself was absolutely huge. So yeah, did my first race in, I think the end of 2021, is when I did my first race. And like I said, I fell in love with it. And so then I did my first paracycling specific race, 2022. Which is where I qualified for my first World Cup and World Championships. And it was Very much so. So when I went into that race, I had just hired a coach, my coach, Tom Davis, who I'm still with to this day. And he and I had talked over the phone, and he was like, okay, well, you're signed up for this race. I had already signed up for the race prior to having hired him. And he had just said, okay, you're going to go out there and you're going to experience everything you could possibly experience in a race. You're going to experience large climbs. You're going to experience fast descents, technical turns, wind, all of it. You name it. You're probably going to experience it out there. And all I want you to do is go out there and ride as hard as you possibly can. And we're going to take that data and start working off of that. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And
Wow, I just got
so,
goosebumps. That sounds like such a pivotal moment in your
yeah,
athletic journey. And I just want to point out, so this routine surgery you had that did not go routine, it's not, I don't know if accident is the right word, but how do you refer to that moment? What's the right terminology there
yeah,
for you?
it's I wouldn't say it was even an accident. It was nothing that the surgeon did or anything. I developed
Hmm.
a blood clot that traveled up my spinal canal and damaged my C4, C5 portion of my spinal cord. And so, it was at the end of the day, it was my body's own doing. And, I get the question all the time of like, oh, did you sue and stuff? And I'm like, no, I didn't. It was my body's own doing. And if you look at my case and my care and stuff, I had the best care you could have ever imagined. They made sure I
Yeah.
was taken care of. They made sure I was safe. They made sure I had everything I needed. They looked at all avenues of like, oh, can she recover? Oh, can she not recover? What's her new normal going to look like? They did all of that absolutely amazingly. And the surgeon was full hands on deck. And throughout the whole recovery journey for me. And so, I couldn't have asked for a better outcome despite the unfortunate circumstances. And so, yeah, it's,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And then to hear that you go from this moment to a full-fledged professional athlete in under 5 years is what the timeline sounds like to me.
yeah,
That's an incredible use of human spirit, if we're being honest. I'm sure that this whole experience tested every part of you, both mentally and physically. But I'm really thinking mentally here about probably all of the new skills and places you had to go to learn this whole new world. What an accelerated timeline you were on, and to come out
yeah.
with so much success so quickly is just quite frankly incredible.
Yeah, yep. And when I did that race in Chattanooga and I had found out that I had qualified for the World Cup and World Championships, it wasn't even 2 weeks later before we were going to be heading to Canada for that World Cup and the World Championships. And I
Oh
had
my
to learn
God.
how to break apart a bike and put it in a bike case. Also, I didn't have a bike case, so my coach, who was in Indiana, lent me his case that he had. And we were over the phone between him and then my Mary Free Bed group, all going over how to break apart a bike and stuff and get it packed and ready for flying and stuff. So I had to learn that. I had to learn how to travel with all this equipment and fly with all this equipment for the very first time, which was nerve-wracking. And thankfully, getting to the airport and stuff, I had my mom and stuff, and she is very much so at the time was like is a keep your feet planted on the ground type person, stay in your comfort zone. And so this was like pretty nerve wracking for her. And I still remember it to this day of her sending me off, and like we cried happy tears and stuff, but it was absolutely amazing. And, one of the biggest things I always throughout my whole journey with everything that I've been through is as successful as I am because of the team behind the team. And it's cycling and running and swimming is so often seen as an individual sport. And when you look at the
Mhm.
TV, people just see the athlete and they're like, oh my gosh, they're so strong. They're such a hard worker and stuff. But they don't, I feel like it's so often overlooked what it takes to get that athlete to that start line and competing as strongly as they are and have the grit and humanity that they do is so much because of all the supporters that they have, both physically with their performance, mentally, support wise, from sponsors to family to friends to mentors and peers. All of it is like a huge reason why I'm as successful as I am. And that has been the case from the very, very minute I got stepped into adaptive sport, even at the recreational level. I got myself into it because of the people around me pushing me and believing in me and stuff. And so, I qualified for my first World Cup and World Championships. We did it. And also at the time, I was pretty newly diagnosed to type 1 diabetes.
Right.
I've been diabetic for about 5 years now. And so we went into that World Cup and World Championships. I was still very new to diabetes, still figuring it out and stuff. And so the team that I had on that World Cup and World Championships, all of us were like, we really don't know what we're doing, but we're going to like roll with the punches and stuff and go with it. And it was quite nerve-wracking. Actually, one of my races, I raced low the whole race in the 40s.
Oh my God.
Yes. Yep. And we were like, yeah, this is not good. And so little back context, I can't feel my low blood sugars. I've never been able to. And so it's always been kind of this, especially in the beginning it was this like gray line of like, am I really low? Like, what is this? And so because I use a continuous glucose monitor. And so there was a lot of learning still happening around it all. And so we were having to like try to listen to the CGM, but also rely on manual readings. And obviously when I'm racing, I can't do manual readings. And so we just went off of like, nope, I think I'm good and stuff and all is dandy. And then we finished and checked and I was in the 40s and we were like, oh my goodness, this is not good. And so, it was just an eye opener to like, holy cow, there's so much that I'm having to like take in while I'm being stepped into racing, just with a spinal cord injury alone and learning how to travel and the bike and stuff. And then also the diabetes. It was very eye-opening, but thankfully, I've been a part of Team Novo Nordisk for almost 4 years now. And they've been a huge support. And also just the diabetes community alone has helped me so much as far as getting on top of management and learning how to manage my diabetes. And that was something for me when I was diagnosed with diabetes. I took it very seriously because one of the major things with diabetes is if it's uncontrolled, the side effects and comorbidities that can happen with diabetes are very dangerous, and even more so dangerous given I have a spinal cord injury and stuff. And
Of
so I
course.
took it very seriously, and got on top of management, and we were learning and trying to figure things out every day. And, we're still to this day learning and adjusting and getting better and better. And so that was a huge hurdle that we had to learn how to work with and stuff. And it definitely exponentially growed once I moved out here to the training center and stuff. And we were able to do a lot more just dialing in and figuring out and looking at my body as a whole and everything. And so started racing for a while, and then started working towards the Paris Paralympics. It was 2023 was probably my busiest year of racing. And I was feeling really strong, feeling good. I had gotten onto my carbon bike, which is a fully carbon fiber frame. And so I had gotten into a bike that was fully fitted to me because the first bike that I was racing in was actually a loaner bike from my friend Nick. And so it wasn't really fit to me, but it got the job done type thing. Definitely had its hiccups. But I got into my first carbon bike that was fitted towards me, and all the adaptations were made to me and my disability. And so I have a really unique shifting and braking setup on my bike. So I actually brake with my elbow, and then I shift with 2 buttons that rest right behind my ear when I'm in my bike. So in order to go down the cassette into an easier gear, I just move my head to the left, and to go up into a harder gear, I move my head to the right. And so it was all stuff that we were like just engineered and we're like working through to make work for me, because my hands are clipped into my cranks when I'm pedaling, and I don't have the hand function to be able to like press a button well enough or engage a brake lever. And so we figured that out and stuff, and we're doing all the racing, and it became the year of Paris. And I had said, okay, I've gotten this far. I'm feeling really strong. The biggest thing I have to do is just keep leaning on my team and stay healthy. Like, that's all I have to do is just keep putting in the work, stay healthy, and do what you're doing. And so that was what I was doing. And then it was about 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks before our last qualifying event for the Paris Paralympics. And the importance of this event is this event, no matter how many races you did the past year or years, if you wanted to make the games, you had to be at this race. And so it was very important. And then it was about 2 weeks before that, I was on one of my long rides up north, and I had finished my ride, and I got off my bike and I went to go load it up into my car, and the back end of my bike, I noticed it like moved a lot more, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I noticed the whole back end of my bike was cracked. The carbon fiber was from end to end.
No.
Yes. Yeah. And I was like, this is not good. And mind you, I had not had the bike even a year. And so I was like, what in the world? And so I was like trying to go through everything. I called Carbon Bike and was like, hey, this is my situation. The whole back end of my bike is cracked. And I haven't even had this bike a year. And at first, they were like, oh, this is how much it's going to be in order to, get a new frame and stuff. And I was like, well, first of all, I got to be to this race in less than 2 weeks. That's not enough. And like, we got to figure out how to fix this.
Right.
And so then I was calling all the carbon repair companies here in Colorado. None of them would touch it because they were like, nope, that's essentially the spine of the bike. And if something goes wrong with that, then we're liable for it, which I totally understood. I was like, yep. This is unfortunate. This sucks. Thankfully, I found a prosthetics company through a triathlon friend here right in Colorado Springs. And they did a very get me by job and used epoxy to repair the back end of my bike. And so epoxied together, my bike made it to the race. And it was actually, I was boarding the plane to get on the race, and our director called me and he was like, hey, come prepared to race, but just know that there's a very likely chance that you may not pass bike check, and we'll address it when you get there. And so bike check is something that we have to all go through to ensure that our bikes are safe and meet the United Cycling Industry's specifications as far as rules and just all the little nitty gritties. You're not allowed to have certain things to make you like more aero or anything like that. And then safety rules as well. And so I was like, that was a hard bullet to bite. And so that whole flight, I was just like shivering in my pants. And mind you, yeah. And so my mom and I, this happened to be the one flight that we were not sat together. And so she didn't know. And then we deboarded, got all my stuff. We got into the rental car, and then I let her know, and just both of us were like, crap. And so it was one of those moments where I, again, just had to lean back on the okay, I've got to just trust the system right now. I've done what I can do. I'm as prepared as I can be. I've just got to use these training days to train, get myself ready, and be ready to show up on race day, ready to race. And so
this is a really interesting kind of nuance to sport that I want to point out to our listeners. Your conversation around carbon fiber equipment, my skis are made of carbon. And so I understand a little bit about what you were experiencing. And you probably know that 2 bikes made from carbon, they're never going to be identical, no matter how they tried to build them. Just like 2 skis, because there's so much carbon fiber in them, they're never the same. But where you and I differ is I can modify my skis when there are faults. We use a lot of JB Weld steel stick. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but we use that to rebuild edges of skis because they don't have to pass any type of inspection. There are regulations, but they're very broad, and nobody would build a ski outside of those regulations because it wouldn't be skiable. In your context, it has to pass very strict inspections and qualifications. And so, there's the whole gut punch of my equipment's broken and I'm going to try to fix it. But for you, it goes deeper. It's now, and it needs to pass inspection so that I actually can race. That is a very deep, complex set of emotions. And you essentially have no control over what happens next at this point.
Yeah, I have no control over it. And, another huge point is in the hand cycling industry, we are not like upright cyclists where, if this really matters to us, we can just go to a bike shop and buy another bike. Right. That is not the case for us. That bike alone was about a 7-month wait for them to build it and get it to me. And so that was also in the back of my head of this is a huge issue, and carbon bike is not a fast process. And this could be a really big issue. But like I said, I had to trust my gut and be like, okay, I've done what I can do and that's all I can do. And I have to show up race day ready to race. And so race day showed up. And let me tell you, I was never more nervous. I could feel my heart beat all the way in my mouth. Like I showed up to those two lines and parked my bike, and they started looking at it. And of course, they immediately go to my draft bar, the back of my bike, where the repair is, and they start messing around with it. And normally it's a very quick, like they touch it for like 2 seconds, check a couple measurements, all is good. And they start looking at it and messing around with it. Let me tell you, it just felt like the longest seconds of my life. I was like, oh goodness.
I bet time slowed down so much for you.
Time slowed down, and our mechanics, Steve and Ian, were in the sideline where you can like view, and I could see them. Both of them are just like watching, like waiting for the answer. Yes. And
like cartoon characters with their eyes sticking out of their head.
Yep, exactly. Yes. And so they complete the bike check, and then they let me know. They're like, hey, we're going to let you race today, but in order to do any further races, you have to have a different frame. This frame is not raceable. And I was like, crap, that is a huge pill to swallow. But again, like I said, I had to swallow it quick, because the shotgun, I looked at the time clock. I had 30 seconds before my time went off. And so I literally just had to swallow it, shove it down my throat, and be like, okay, I've got a race. We'll figure this out afterwards. My mom, everyone that was there for me, all cheered me on and was like, just go do what you do best and go race your heart out. And that's exactly what I did. I had an amazing performance. It felt really good. And so then we finished up, we wrapped up, we did podium, and I didn't even bring the topic up. I was just like, I just want to get through these couple days and just figure it out. Then we had to wait, I think it was 1 or 2 days, while the selection committee went through all the results, went through all the past year's results, and decided the Paris team. And then they let us know that we would receive a phone call letting us know whether or not we made or did not make the team. And so my mom, her friend, and I, we were in the car and we were driving to go get dinner. And I get the call from my director, and the first thing out of his mouth is he congratulates me. He's like, congrats, Kate, you've made the Paris Paralympic roster, and I'm super excited to see what you are able to accomplish there, and we're gonna go kick some butt. It was so hard. In the moment, I couldn't even be excited, because I was internalizing this. I do not have a bike. I literally do not have a bike right now that is race legal. And so the first thing out of my mouth when he told me that, I couldn't even say like, thank you, or like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. It was literally, okay, what do we do about my bike? And so then that was the amazing thing about Ian is, he is so professional and just knows all the ins and out of the Paralympic world and our equipment and stuff, and is so dialed in and has the connections and contacts with Carbon Bike and all the like our major prosthetics companies and stuff to get out all of the athletes within cycling the equipment that we need. And so he was like, yep, we're going to get in contact with Carbon Bike and get this figured out. And all is going to be, we're going to get it figured out one way or another. So took that and I was like, okay. I was like, let's do this. We're going to do this. And so we had a little under a month before we headed out for our training camp for the games. And so I had packed up and we had headed back. And then it was about 2 days of being home. All was going fine. I did my typical, anytime I come back from a race, we typically keep it pretty easy, just do zone 2 rides, kind of shake things back out, get back acclimated to altitude. It was quite hot, so I was also just keeping things easy. And I was feeling okay. And then it was about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning that I woke up with a really high fever and came down super sick. And it was in like the worst pain of my life. I went into sports med that next morning and was like, something is wrong. And they sent me over to the emergency room. And then in the emergency room ended up admitting me because I had a pretty serious kidney infection. And so that happened. And so then I was in the hospital for a little over 2 weeks with this kidney infection. And it was very scary, very nerve-wracking, because also we had all this bike stuff happening. And so that was all being taken care of behind the scenes for me while I was in the hospital. They got a new frame ordered, and it got to Colorado Springs just in time for us to leave. Our mechanic transferred over all of my gearing equipment and my shifting and my braking and all of that, and got that all fit onto the new bike. And we weren't even able to test it to make sure it all fit until I got out of the hospital. And, the hospital, it was pretty scary. I lost, nearly 15 pounds in that 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was not good at all. And all of us were very scared just as far as it all. But again, it was one of those, I heavily leaned on my team and the doctors there within UC Health and stuff, and just trusted the team that I was going to be okay. And so I ended up getting discharged from rehab, and we were like, okay, we think you're good. All is good. Do you think you're good? And I said, yep, I think I'm good. Let's go. And so, we went off to Majorca and just took it very, very cautiously. We were like, we just got to take this a day at a time. Just listen to your body. All is good. Things weren't, 100%. I was having a lot of GI issues and stuff at the time. We just thought it was residuals of, the antibiotics and stuff and all of that. And so I was on a pretty limited diet and just was dealing with a lot of nausea and discomfort and stuff throughout that whole time. But got me through the training camp in Majorca, which honestly, I was so thankful for. It was beautiful there. The team that we had there, as far as support staff, were absolutely amazing. And getting me ready to race and stuff, and just building my confidence and believing me and stuff with everything that I had been through. And so, got through that, and then Paris came, opening village, opening ceremonies, and then racing happened. My very first event was the time trial, and I was very nervous. And so something very special about the time trials is the majority of the time we have what's called a follow car. And we have a mic set where the person who is following behind us, which is typically our coach, or in my case, it was our director, Ian. And then we have an earpiece where we can hear our director. And they're typically giving us cues of like, hey, you have this turn coming up. Hey, there's a bump in the road right to your right or something, giving us motivation, all of that. And, Ian and I had talked that day, and I told him, I was like, just keep me going. That's all you got to do is just keep me going. And that's exactly what he did. And he just had nothing but utmost confidence in me and just kept me motivated throughout that whole time. And I did. I raced my heart out, and I managed to get gold in the time trial at Paris, which was absolutely huge. It was probably one of my most cherished medals I've ever received, just with everything that I had been through. It was absolutely amazing, absolutely heartwarming. And so kind of rebuilt my confidence and got me reset. And then a few days later, we had the team relay. And that was another very special event for me because it was me, my teammate Travis, and then my teammate Matt. Both me and Matt had come into Paris having sustained illness or injury. Matt had an injury where his foot fell out of his footrest and his foot got dragged and scraped all the way down to the bone. And so he was dealing with that. And so this team relay was, it was a Russian roulette. We didn't know what was going to happen just because two of us were injured. So it was scary, but we managed to take away a very, very secured bronze in that team relay. And it was, just very, very fulfilling and very heartwarming. And again, just that, it was because of the team behind the team that we were as successful as we were. And it was probably one of our best team relays we've ever had within the Paralympics, just given everything and the team and the athletes, all three of us, we all went out there and gave it our absolute best and showed up that day and secured that bronze, which was absolutely amazing.
You would never know by looking at those two medals, right? Everything that went into them. And I know you've said it kind of point blank many times so far in this episode. It's not an individual sport. And I relate to you in that my sport is considered individual, but it requires such a massive team to do the damn thing, as I like to say. You need a boat driver, you need a coach, you need somebody on equipment, you need so many people to make it happen. And I love that you have that perspective of your sport because I think it's so true. Now, something I would love to know from you, your perspective, when we see media around the Paralympics and Paralympic athletes, when they speak about resilience, they tend to focus on the disability And if there was an event that caused the disability, there tends to be a lot of narrative around that specifically. And I feel like that doesn't do justice to the entirety of the athlete's career and the resilience that's needed along the way, right?
Yeah.
And especially your story you just shared. I mean, how many times did you have to deploy exceptional resilience to stay the path, stay on the road, if I may be so tongue in cheek? From your perspective, how would you like media to speak about your resilience as a Paralympian?
This episode of Athlete Actually is supported by Sport Certified Powered by iHerb, a collection of supplements rigorously tested for quality, purity, and performance. For athletes, what you put in your body matters. Sport Certified Powered by iHerb products are tested to meet strict standards, giving you confidence that what's on the label is what's in the bottle. From protein and hydration to essential vitamins and recovery support, their lineup is built for active lifestyles. You can explore the full Sport Certified collection at sportcertified.com.
It's so hard, and that's something that I have worked very hard to share in my social media is, the background and, the behind the scenes of getting through racing and continuing to race and being able to race. Racing is both a privilege, and it's also, it's an honor. It's something I enjoy very much. One of the biggest things I always say is I love racing and I love being competitive, but the main reason I race is to show myself, not only myself, but also others, what's truly possible out there, despite circumstances and disabilities and everything that we face in day to day, both on the Olympic and the Paralympic side. It's something I love about the Olympics and Paralympics is every single one of us athletes have such just absolutely incredible stories and journeys getting to sports. We're not like the NBA and NFL and stuff where we're receiving $1 million, incomes and stuff to get us to sports. The majority of Olympic and Paralympic athletes are working side jobs just in order to do their sports and represent their country in their sports. They're having to do side hustles and full-time jobs and work really hard to find sponsorships and support and access to resources and stuff to be able to perform their sports. Huge reason why the Olympics and Paralympics are so strong and has such a powerful movement is because of how hard each and every athlete works to show up on that stage. And it's a big reason why I am still here to this day, even despite everything I've been through, is because every single one of us athletes are dealing with struggles, daily struggles and battles and stuff, and coming onto that stage to be as strong as we possibly can and represent our nations and represent the world and just show, what is truly possible. And so, yeah, I think it's very important to understand the stories and just what all it takes to show up to the start lines and show up ready for game day and everything is a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you and I think of all the athletes that we know, professional athletes, and the background context that we have on their story and like everything that goes into making that person that we know, it's so much more rich than the media or anybody could ever really give them credit for, right? There's just so much to it. And that's the point of, a show like this is getting to hear in your own words everything that we otherwise wouldn't have known, even though we watched you on the broadcast in Paris, right?
Yeah.
And this just adds so much color to that story. So you walked away with a gold and a bronze. Absolutely incredible. What happened after that? And then what's on the horizon for you now?
Yeah. So for me, I would say I had the post golden stage blues happen to me hard after racing, because after I was done racing at the Paralympics, we had world championships. I secured gold there as well, and it was amazing. But it was immediately after Paris, so I actually stayed over in Europe. I was in Europe about a month and a half total, almost 2 months. And I came back, and the reality for me is I was still facing complications from this kidney infection that we had to get figured out. I was dealing with something called autonomic dysreflexia, which is where it raises your blood pressure due to my spinal cord injury whenever there's something wrong with your body. We were trying to get that figured out. And then I was having a lot of GI issues still that we couldn't get figured out at the time. We thankfully, actually, I would say, pretty quickly got it figured out. I have what's called gastroparesis, which is paralyzation of the stomach and intestinal dysmotility. So my whole GI tract is affected as far as its ability to absorb nutrients and move nutrients through my GI tract. And so it was several months where I was not able to ride at all because I had lost a significant amount of weight and was very malnourished and stuff while we were trying to figure this all out. We had started with a feeding tube, a surgically implanted feeding tube, and tried doing tube feeds. And we thought that was going well. My weight was going up a little bit, but, my lab values were still not the best, but we were like, we're trying to look at it as a global picture of like, yeah, I think things are all right. And it was World Championships last year. Right before then, my GI team had said, hey, this is where we're at. I don't think this is going as we need it to be. And you need to consider what's called total perinatal nutrition, which is nutrition that goes straight to your venous system through a central line. And it is very dangerous. It's very high risk. And it was something I was not ready for at all. And that was quite literally a few days before leaving for World Championships. And I had told them, I was like, no, I don't think we're there. I want to make sure we've exhausted all options feeding tube wise before we go that route. And they were like, okay, yep, that's totally fine. That's totally fair. And yeah, we had tried a lot feeding tube wise, and it was not the most successful at all. And just very hard. I was still dealing with a lot of nausea and stuff and side effects, and just not able to. I was performing well on the bike, but I just was not myself in the global scheme of things and was a little nervous. But, I tried trusting my team in that moment of like, nope, we're okay. We got this. I think things are okay. So I went to World Championships last year and was supposed to race, and then ended up having a low blood sugar where I went unresponsive and ended up in the ICU when we were in Belgium last year, which was very scary and very eye-opening for me, just how severe my state was. At the time, we were just very unsure of like, why did this low blood sugar happen? Once we got me back to the States, it was pretty quickly determined that it was just because my body was completely depleted glycogen store-wise. I just had nothing to fight on as far as ability to bring my blood sugar back up. I had required 2 rounds of dextrose via the ambulance and then a dextrose strip in the ICU to get me back. And that was very scary and very eye-opening. I still in the moment was like, because when I was in the ICU in Belgium, they had told me, shouldn't happen again. You should be fine. And so I very much so wanted to race and still continue to race. But the team was like, nope, it's not safe, which was very hard for me to hear because I had not raced for so long. This was my one chance to get back and stay on national team. And so not being able to race, I went into it of like, shoot, I'm very scared. I'm going to lose health insurance. I'm going to lose my benefits and all that, which is, as an athlete, it's a very just in many ways cutthroat side of sport that we all face as athletes. If you're not performing, you don't get benefits. And that's something that all of us athletes face. Was very hard. So I was very scared in the moment. I was scared for my health. I was scared for a global scheme of things as far as income, as far as health insurance, all of that. Thankfully, still was able to receive health insurance and partial national team benefits. So, I took a cut this year, which was hard, really hard, especially just considering everything that I've gone through the last year now. It's been completely out of my control, and that's been hard for me because I'm very much so, roll through the punches type person, and I wasn't able to roll through the punches. I was sidelined, and that was very hard for me, both mentally and physically. And yeah, so I got back from World Championships, and they pretty immediately got me started on TPN, total perinatal nutrition, which is now the form of nutrition that I rely on. At the time, when I was first introduced to it, they gave me a, average life expectancy on TPN. They're like, the average life expectancy for someone to sustain and live on TPN is 5 to 7 years. And that was extremely hard for me to hear. It scared the living daylights out of me. I was like, I'm 27 years old. and you're telling me 5 to 7 years, that is not what I want to hear. And, one of the things I have always lived by since my spinal cord injury is I just want to live my life to the fullest I can with what I have. And that message is the first thing that came to my mind when they told that to me. And it was very, very hard. And so my mission never became stronger to get back on the bike and get back to doing what I love. Because the bike is my happiness and what allows me to show up for myself and show up for others and work through all that I've struggled through. And I wasn't able to be on the bike for probably the first, I would say, 3 to 4 months of being on TPN. I was not able to be on the bike because I dealt with some complications with the TPN. I ended up dealing with going anemic to the point I needed 3 blood transfusions, which was also very scary. I didn't feel much side effects from it, aside from the lab work showing, hey, you are dangerously anemic. You need a blood transfusion now. And so 3 emergency room trips because of anemia. And we just figured out it was some stuff missing in the TPN. And so, I've been good since then. And we slowly started reintroducing me to the bike. And let me tell you, it was a mental and physical battle as far as, am I actually good to be on the bike? Am I okay to be on the bike? Because there was a lot of fight back and forth between my team and I, me feeling like I'm okay, them being like, no, me continuing to feel like I'm okay, that back and forth, as a gritty athlete that I am and stuff, wanting to get back to sport and stuff. It was hard. It was several months of that. And, it did kind of create some internalized fear. And so, yeah, we got me back to training and we've slowly been building back up. And my first race back was last month in Thailand, and I was very nervous. Again, just leaned on my team and trusted that, I am very strong. I'm actually currently on the bike the strongest I've ever been, as far as just metrics wise and performance wise. We've discovered, we think, my body's been dealing with this a lot longer than even before the kidney infection. We think that this has been going on a lot longer than we ever thought or envisioned, because since being on TPN, I'm the healthiest I've ever been, which has been amazing. And, thankfully, again, through community and through talking to others, I was able to hear that, yes, the average lifespan for TPN is 5 to 7 years, but there are definitely outliers in the lifestyle that I live. I am definitely on a trajectory to be able to live on it much longer and stuff. And so, I've hung on to that, and just also the fact that I'm back on the bike, I'm the strongest I've ever been, and feeling good. And, we're continuing to progress every week now, which is amazing. And I went to Thailand, which was very nerve-wracking. It was my first major travel with TPN. Traveling with TPN is very difficult. You hear little ins and outs of people having to travel with their medical devices as far as diabetes stuff and ostomy supplies and prosthetics and, all that and stuff. But TPN is a whole nother game. So our trip was about 11 days, and I received all the supplies that I would need for my TPN, and it came in 6 huge boxes. And I was like, I looked at it and it took up my whole living room. And I was like, how am I supposed to get this into a suitcase for 11 days?
Right. So much for traveling light.
Yes, exactly. And let me tell you, I traveled light when it comes to personal belongings. I had 2 casual day outfits and 2 race suits is all I came with. Yep. And then my toiletries were in my carry-on bag. And it ended up being 2 suitcases that I had to bring, and it was 95 pounds worth of luggage just for my TPN. Yep. And yeah. And so it was all medical supplies aside from those 2-day outfits and the 2 cycling outfits. And I did European style laundry, sink washing.
Yes.
And, we got me through, and the trip ended up being amazing. I would say one of my most successful trips as far as diabetes management, GI wise, felt amazing on and off the bike, was able to stay on top of symptoms and stuff and manage pretty well. We learned some stuff to better improve for this next trip that I've got going. And I was able to take away a complete podium sweep, both in the team relay, the time trial, and the road race, getting gold in all three.
Congratulations.
Yep. It was, I've been building a comeback ever since all this GI stuff. It's been a very hard road back, both mentally and physically. And this race it meant a lot for me. One thing, it being the first World Cup or World Championships to ever be held in Asia was huge for paracycling. And so that was huge. And then also just my first race back in well over a year and a half was huge for me. And it was the confidence that I needed. Next, I've got Italy that I leave for. We leave a week from Friday, which is exciting. And so I've just been slowly getting ready for that. I actually just received my diabetic alert dog, Sabako, not even 2 weeks ago. And so he and I have been bonding together. And becoming a team. And he's been catching both low and high blood sugars, getting exposed to all different types of situations and stuff. He's a young guy. He's not even a year and a half old. And yeah, it's been amazing. This season is, I feel like I have a whole nother avenue of doors opening for me. And I'm really excited for this next World Cup. But most importantly is we have our first World Championships being held here in the U.S. on U.S. soil this September in Huntsville, Alabama. And that's the big event we're all working really hard towards. Super, super excited for it. And so, the doors are open and we're progressing and we're back in the game. It's because of my supporters, both Team Novo Nordisk, Team USA and USA Cycling and stuff. And my doctors and my family and all my fans out there and, Parity and stuff. Wouldn't be doable without all of you guys. And so
I feel like Kate, you're not giving yourself enough credit though. I mean, you said it yourself. You are such an outlier in every sense of the word. And I admire that so much about you. Every time there's a new curveball thrown at you, you find a way to grow and capitalize on it. And I feel like if we say that the Kate that won the Paralympics was Kate Brim 2.0, I feel like we're about to see Kate Brim 3.0 season in Huntsville. Your story is just truly incredible. Thank you for sharing so much of it.
Yeah. One of the things that since my injury I've always lived on is, we can sit in perpetual sadness and in our sorrows and stuff, or we can take those struggles and run with them and try to grow with them and work with them and move on with life and, use them as our little kick in the butt that we need to keep us going and just keep pushing on. Despite the circumstances, the sky's the limit. Just keep going and lean on those around you. And that's exactly what I've been doing and is why I am as successful as I am and will continue to live by that every day. For sure.
You are so incredible. I'm a Kate Brim fan for life. And I think anybody who listens to this is a Kate fan for life. Kate, before we wrap up, I have to take us to our last segment, which is called The Last Lap. So Kate, if you, Kate Brim, were the answer to a sports trivia question in your perfect world, what would that sports trivia question be?
That's a hard one. I don't have a good answer for that, but I think a question that I always like people to know is, what is the classification system within the Paralympics? And so, the Paralympics, when we see a bunch of disabled people and people don't quite understand it and how it works and stuff. But, we have what's called a classification, which is a system that puts us into categories to level the playing field. And it is a system that has been transforming from day one and is still transforming to this day. Every year it's growing and becoming more fine-tuned and making the playing field more level every single year and growing, and we're finding hiccups and we're finding strengths in it. And, it's what makes the Paralympics so strong and is what makes it able for all of us to compete and stuff. And, you see so many disabilities out there competing with one another, and it's all because of this system that we've created, the classification system. And so I think that would be my, what's your question?
And truly, that's something all of us should be Googling more frequently is how do these classification systems work? How do all the Paralympic sports work relative to their counterpart in the Olympics? It's truly just such a fascinating world of sport. And I think that's why we all love it, is all of the nuance and all of the stories. Kate, thank you so much for sharing today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was an absolute honor.
Thanks for listening to Athlete Actually. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share with someone who should be part of the conversation. To learn more about how brands are partnering with pro women athletes, visit ParityNow.com.